All right, everybody. Thank you so much for taking the time today to join me for this webinar. This is Fusion 360 CAM Basic. My name is Lars Christensen, and I am part of the technical marketing group here at Autodesk. Before we jump into the software, because that's really where we want to be, let me just jump over a couple of the intro here. So, well, the minutes really, I'm just going to show you as much as I can the next hour or so. But what I want to make sure is important is that you type in your questions in the question area over in the webinar. And I'm assuming most people have been on GoToMeeting or GoToWebinars before, so you know all about the little box you can type it into. But please just start typing as you're going along. I will wait till the end, just because if not, that's kind of like stumbling things up. But start typing in your questions. If I don't get to your questions in the end, I will respond to you per email. So don't worry about that. But please, just, if anything comes up along the way, type them in, and then we'll try to address as many of them as we can in the end. So quickly, who am I? My name is Lars Christensen, and like I said, I'm part of the technical marketing team here at Autodesk. The best thing I probably can do for you guys is to introduce you to my email address, so you can start typing that down. And I will want to let you know that anything that I'm showing today, the models I'm showing today inside of Fusion 360, I will be more than happy to share those with you. All you have to do is send me an email and say, hey, I want those files, and I'll be glad to send them to you. I'm going to try to do it as fast as I can as you're getting in there. Now, to talk a little bit about who I am for 2 seconds. So my background is I am a mold maker of trade, have been in industry both when I lived where I grew up in Denmark, and then I've been living in the United States for the past 17 years, and also done manufacturing over here. So a lot of CAM programming and running around the shop floor. Another place besides my email address is also out on social. You can hunt me down there. I am pretty much on most social networks, or whatever is your favorite. You can probably find me there. And if you can't find me on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter or Snapchat or whatever, again, send me an email and says, where the heck are you? I'll make sure that I direct you to it. But this was really my 25-slide PowerPoint right here. This is all I wanted to show you in PowerPoint. What I really want to do is I want to jump into software. And the idea about today's webinar is really trying to attack the basics of CAM. Let me just jump over to Fusion, because that's really where most of the fun is. And I'll start out with just showing you the interface. You're probably already somewhat familiar with some of the things in here. Some of the models that I'm using here, you maybe have seen before been used in videos and so forth. But it's just good models to use. The models that you will get from me, or at least a few of them, will already have a toolpath in them. So you can kind of like go in and take a look at what I have done in regards to programming these. But of course today we are not just going to click through here. We're actually going to go in and create the toolpath. And my hope is, if I do a good job, and please, you're more than welcome to send me email about that. If I do a good job today, you will feel a lot more comfortable jumping in and start attacking inside of CAM. So the first thing I want to do is, with this mod, minimize the data panel over here so we get a little bit more real estate. That's kind of like nice to do that. And I'm just going to go out here and delete these toolpaths right out of here to start with. I'm going to hit delete and get rid of those. Now, I will take you through what I will call the 3 steps of doing CAM inside of Fusion. The first one is the work setup and how we set things up. Number 2 is applying the toolpath. And number 3 is actually to simulate and to post out code. And there's going to be a lot of repetition in what I'm doing, because repetition is the key of learning. So I'm going to do a lot of things over and over. So if you see things that you're kind of like, whoa, I missed that, chances are I'm going to show it later on anyway. So really just kick back, with whatever beverage you prefer, depending on what time it is, if it's before or after 5 p.m. And let's, kind of like dig into it. So what I have here is a setup where we have a plate that is located inside of a vise on a table. Now, of course, you don't need to always have the vise and the table in there to do that. But let me just quickly throw a toolpath on here so you can get kind of like the rhythm of how you apply toolpath. Because if you're like me, that you are coming from another CAM system, or in case that you have never touched CAM before, it's just important that you get that rhythm down. So up in the ribbon bar up here, we have the kind of like different modes. So I'm going to start in the 2D. Now the 2D is everything where we are moving with X and Y and then positioning with Z. And Z is normally what is going up and down. We're going to get into that a little bit too. So I'm going to start out with just a simple facing operation in here. I'm going to click on the facing operation. What you will see that we get a little window that shows you kind of like what the toolpath is going to do. That's really helpful if you're new, right? You can kind of like hover over each toolpath and get an idea about what that tool does. So use that to your advantage. So I'm going to select the facing operation. And as soon as I do that, I do get a window over to the right. And it's important to say that this window is always the same, no matter what type of toolpath you're in. So if you are in 2D like we're doing now, it will always be the same as it is in 3-axis, where it's like swoopy surfaces and so forth. So that's important. And always these 5 tabs up here are always the same. The reason for that is it makes it easier for people to learn and also to remember, because some people get to program all day long, but other people, they program for maybe an hour and then they got to go out and run the part, and maybe they don't come back to CAM, for maybe 2 weeks. So making it the same all the time just makes it easier for everybody. It always starts with the tool. So that's another thing that is just good for you to know if you are new to CAM, is don't worry about this. You will always get introduced with the same thing, and is always starting with a tool. Now I'm going to go out here and select tool, and we get, as soon as we click on that, we get the tool library here showing up on the screen. I'm going to come back to that a little bit later too, so don't dig too far into this right now. But I'm just going to select what is called a face mill right here. So I'm just going to click on it. We get a little window that shows us what kind of tool it is. You'll see if I select another tool, the window changes. So I'm going to select the face mill, and I'm going to hit OK. Now, the next tab is where we can select our geometry. Now, when I click on that one, you will see that we get a light orange box around our part here. And that's because Fusion is smart enough to know that there's something there for us to machine. So since this is a facing operation, we kind of like just want to machine the boundary box of this part. We actually don't have to select any geometry. The software is smart enough, because it is a solid environment. It's smart enough to know that there's something there. So I'm just going to go ahead here and hit OK. And when I hit OK, you will see that we get presented with some blue and green lines here that shows us that there's a toolpath. Now we can also go up here and click on the simulate button up here. So I'm going to click on that, and that takes us into a simulate view. Now in here you can choose either to show the stock like I have right now, or I can uncheck it and we don't see the stock. And then we can go down here and hit the play button, and you will now see that it simulates what the tool is going to be doing out of the machine. Now if I click on stock, you will see the stock turns on, and of course that's nice. Now we kind of like get an idea about what's going to happen to the material out of the machine. This is really the steps we go through to apply toolpath inside of Fusion. We go up and we select the tool and we simulate it, And when we have simulated, then we can go ahead and we can post out the NC code when we have gotten what we want. And of course, I'm going to take it a lot deeper into the toolpath. But after you have simulated the toolpath, you can now go up and click on Post Process. And when you do that, you'll be this dialog here. And there is a lot of different posts in here. As you can see here, there's a lot of different posts. So you should be able to find your machine, whatever kind of machine you have. You should be able to find it in here. Now, there is also another resource that is important for me to show you before we go any further. And that is, if I go out to my web browser, cam.autodesk.com is a website that we have at Autodesk that have combined the free products where this HSM CAM is running within. And if you go to cam.autodesk.com, you go to products, you will also see down here that is a post-processing tab. And if you click on that, that will take you out to another in-depth post library. The reason I want to show you this is the post file is extremely important, because what the post file does is it takes what we have created on the computer screen and converts it into what is called G code. And that is all the machine really cares about. If I go back into Fusion here, you know, all the things we have just done inside the screen really is not going to make us parts. That is not really important. What is important is the code for the machine. And we also have a post team available at Autodesk that can assist you in case that we provide you with generic posts. So in case there's not a post for your specific machine, we will definitely help you get a post for your machine. But the drop down I showed you before, this is all the stuff that already comes within Fusion. The website, there is some it's like the next level of posts. So you just need to be aware of that. This is no big deal, but it's important for you to know that we have all this available for you, and it comes with the product. So when I have selected the post I want, I can go ahead and I can post this out, and I'm just going to throw it right on my desktop, right? And when I do that, then I will get the code showing up here on my screen. And this, like I said, is what really matters. This is what's going to make your part on your machine, this code. And in here, you will see different things that you can use. You will see there's a tool change. It changes tool number 1. It shows some feeds and speeds, some work offset, and then all the different commands. And this is why it's important you're selecting the right post processor, because the post processor is what's going to run the control on your machine to do the right thing. So I just wanted to show you really how easy it is to go through all those steps to get the code. That's really what I'm going to be repeating from here on and out. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to actually delete the toolpath that we just created. And I'm also going to delete the setup that was created in here. And let me go back to the model tab where we have all the different parts. So like what I said earlier was that I have all mine set up here in a vise on a table. And if you email me, I'll be glad to share this with you too. Many times you can find devices and so on the device manufacturer's website. But I'll be more than happy if you, and I'll show my email at the end of this webinar. I'll be more than happy to send you what I got. But really what all matters here is this plate. That's why we got a machine. Though that there is some advantages of having things sitting in a vise, and I'll show you that in a second. So let me go in and right-click and isolate the plate. So this is probably how you many times would have the part if you don't put it inside of the vise and such. So we just have the part on the screen, and we are now ready to apply our toolpath. Now remember that I deleted everything before, so we kind of like got to start from scratch. So I'm going to go back into CAM. The first thing we always do is we got to create what is called a setup. And the best way I think to explain this is when you have your CNC machine, if you go out to that CNC machine on the shop floor, you're looking at it, then everything there is pretty much defined, right? there is an x-axis, the table move along. There's a y-axis that the table move along. And most of the times there's a z-axis where the head is moving up and down. That is pretty much defined out on the machine. But inside of CAM, we have some great flexibility. So what we need to do first is we have to tell the CAM software how things are defined out of the machine. So what the X and the Y and the Z, where they're pointing up and down. And then second of all, we need to be able to tell the CAM where we are going to pick it up. So when we take this part and we actually put it in the vise out of the machine, where are we picking up on the part so we get the right X, Y, and Z coordinates? So I'm going to click on this setup box, and we get prompted with the menu over here. Now, a little advice: every time you're working inside of pretty much any software, one of my rules is always start from the top and work your way down. And if there's multiple tabs, then start with the first tab, just like you would read a book, right? And things in here are actually pretty straightforward. So working from the top way down, if I go to the first one here, we can choose what type of machining we're going to do. So inside of Fusion, we can do milling, we can do turning, mill turn, and then we have the water, laser, plasma option in here. Now, this is clearly a milling part, so we're going to leave it like that. Now, the next thing we're going to work with is what is called the work coordinate system. And it's probably one of the hardest things in the milling, but I think that the developers of Fusion have done a really nice job with this. The work coordinate system is also what we many times out of the machine is calling G54 or G55. It's literally like, where is our work offsets going to come from? Now, I'm going to give you a little tip here. When you click on the orientation tab, you will see that there's some different options in here. I only use one of these, and that is the first one that is called Select C-axis and X-axis. And I will almost guarantee that 99% of the time, that is all you ever going to need to be able to control the directions of your X, Y, and Z coordinates. So that's what we're going to use. So just remember that that's the one. Write that down. All right, so I click on that one and we get some options over here. Now, look in the graphics window. We get this XYZ gnomon, a triad, whatever you want to call it. This is really indicating what is the X, Y, and Z out of the machine. So think about it like that. And of course, in my case here, just like in most other cases, for me, when I do something, it's not right, right? If there's a 50-50 chance, it will not be in the right direction. That's exactly what we have here. So we're going to have to change this. What I want to do is I want to switch this Z-axis to be where the Y-axis is right now, right? I need to rotate that because my machine, you know, I'm not going to machine this face here. I'm going to machine this face here. So the way it works is, if you look over here, you will see that this says nothing, and it's kind of like blue and highlighted. That tells us that the software is ready to set the Z-axis. Now, this is extremely easy. Whatever face you're selecting right on your model, that axis will go perpendicular to that, or the axis will point in that direction. So check this out. If I go over here and I select the top face, you will actually see that the blue Z-axis is going to flip up 90 degrees and actually kind of like be in a line perpendicular or pointing in this direction. So let me click on it there. Right? So now you can see that the Z-axis is actually now going up and down. And this is how we want it. Now, this is actually how I want it placed when I'm done with this, but let me just show you, because it jumped directly to the X-axis down here. So that's the red icon you see there. And if I wanted to rotate that 90 degrees, I could just select on this face. Right? Now you see that now the X-axis is pointing toward that face. If I go back up again and I select this face, you will see that now it's pointing with that. So that is really just how easy you can go in and switch the direction of, so you make sure that everything is the same way it's going to be out of the machine. So if you're standing out of the machine, how is this plate going to fit in there? The next thing we got to do is we got to show where we are going to pick up the part. And that really depends on you and what you want to do. You need flexibility out there. There's some general rules on how you want to do things. So if I go down here, this box point is showing right now, and you will see that you have some different options. I'm actually going to use selected point a little bit later. But with box points, I get kind of these small golf balls showing up in here that I can click on and place this gnomon, where we're going to pick up the part out of the machine. Now, if you're a mold maker of trade, you many times choose to select the center of the part, because an ejection mold, normally you kind of like call the center as the heart, and everything kind of like builds from that. But tool and die makers, for example, they like to pick up a corner, for example, of the part. So I'm going to select this corner over here. And this is actually my preferred corner. The reason this is my preferred corner to pick up a part is that then I'm selecting the same edge here that is resting against the solid jaw on my vise, and I'm not risking any movement. The jaw that is tightening on the part on this end actually have a little bit of movement in it. But I also know that I know one guy who always select this corner, because then his X and Y are always showing plus in his code, and he preferred that. This is really a preference thing, but again, my choice is normally selecting this upper corner here. So now I picked where am I going to select this part out at the machine. Now the next tab over here is stock, and this is where we can define how the stock is going to be on this part. It defaults to relative size box, and what it have done here is it added like 1 millimeter, this is in metric, whatever, 1 millimeter stock around this part. And I normally say that's a good rule to use relative size stock if you don't already have your stock available. But if you do have your stock available, it is good practice to actually measure the stock and put it in here. So there's a fixed size box. If you select that, you can actually put in the dimensions of the stock that you're going to be using. And that, friends, that's a good habit to get into if you're not already doing that. So be aware of that. There is also a from solid in here. I'm going to show in a few minutes too, an option in here that can be pretty powerful. But I'm going to leave this a relative size box. This is really all I have to do to be able to set up this part. So let me just recap that. So you go and you create the setup up here, and then you choose what you're going to be doing, in our case milling. Remember, always select the top one, the first one, select Z-axis plane and X-axis, and then we're selecting the faces on our model to place this gnomon, a triad, so it resembles what we have out of the machine. And down here we can then select where we are picking up the part. Either we're using these stock points, or we can actually use different other options in here that you can play around with a little bit yourself. So with that, I'm going to hit OK. And don't forget, if you have any questions as we're going through that, throw them in the questions section there, and I'll make sure that I get back to you on the different ones. But this is what we have to do to set up the stock, and this is by far the easiest thing I have ever used with CAM. It just takes a few times going through it, and you should be pretty set for that. So then we can go in and repeat what I did before. We can go in and we can apply the first toolpath, and many times you will use what is a facing operation in here. And that is really just to face off the top of the part to make sure that it's flat and we have a good surface, so when we start putting in pockets and other things, we can actually measure from a good datum, right? So again, like I said before, it will always start, the 5 tabs are always the same, and it will always start with the tool. So I'm going to go in and select that same face mill I selected before, hit OK to that. And the next tab is always geometry. And just like I said before, one of the cool things about being inside of a solid is that the computer actually knows that there's something there. So the computer already knows the boundary of this plate. So I actually don't have to select anything for doing my facing operation. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit OK to that. And just like again before, we do get our toolpath showing up here. Now, we can of course go in and simulate. You can choose if you want the stock turned on or not turned on. Preferably, I normally have the stock on. It's just kind of like nice to be able to see it a little bit better. But if you're just running some quick runs through things, then sometimes you choose not to have the stock on. You will kind of like find that as you're going through the software. All right. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to start machining these pockets out here. So for that, I'm going to go up and use something called 2D Adaptive. Now, this is a roughing toolpath, but if you come from another CAM system, you definitely have to check this out, because this is something that I don't think any other CAM system. There's other other toolpath like it out there, but I don't think there's anything as great as the 2D adaptive clearing that we have inside of Fusion. What it does is it keeps a constant load on your cutter, what actually means that you can cut with the full depth of the cutter, because it's kind of like keeping a constant load on the cutter instead of like going in and out of engagement. So I'm going to select that, and again, you will see the menus are the same as before for the facing. So the first thing is the tool. Now I'm going to go in and select another tool in here. So I'm going to select the 16 millimeter flat end mill in here. And then when I go to the geometry tab, now I actually have to specify what it is that I'm going to be machining. What I prefer to do is I prefer to select the edge down in the end of the pocket. So I'm going to click on that. And as soon as I do that, you will see that it shows very nicely on the screen with a blue shadow where the boundary is. And there is also a little red arrow right there that actually will let you switch sides. So let me show you that. If I go over and select in the next pocket, you see how it suddenly flipped the shadow? It flipped it to be on the outside of the pocket. Well, that's because where I picked the geometry, it will flip it around. But you can just hit this little arrow like that, and now you will see that it's back in again. So that controls where you're selecting on the geometry right here. And it does it again with that one there. So I select those 4 pockets right on the edge in here, and you can control on those small arrows where it's going to machine. Now, to take you through the rest of the tabs over here, the next tab is what is called the height tab. And this is where we can control a couple of things. We can control the retract height. So when it's done machining, how high does it going to retract above, or clearance, sorry, retract height is here. Here's clearance height. So clearance height, when we were rabbiting around our part, retract height is that when it's done machining a pocket, how high it's going to move up after it's done machining. So here our clearance height is set to the retract height plus another 10 millimeters. So when it's rabbiting it around, it will do a clearance height of the retract height plus 10, and the retract height itself is the stock top plus 5. It will show the top height of where is our cutter is kind of like going to start from, will be from the top of the stock, and then we have the bottom height, how deep is it going to machine, and in this case it selected the bottom contours, and that was why I selected at the bottom edges of the pocket, because now I know that that's how deep it's going to machine. Something that you really quickly can get comfortable with in here, really these clearance heights, you really don't have to mess a lot with these on a regular basis. These are more important, the top height and the bottom height. You should of course pay attention to them, but the 4th tab has everything to do with the cutter engaged in the material. So what that means is the cutter is inside and cutting in the material, and you will see in here we can control a load on the cutter. So how thick can the chips be per step over, kind of, in here, and you can control that depending on, that really depends on your machine and your tooling. So this is something that you will adjust, and you can definitely email me about that, and we can take that a little bit deeper too if you want to dig a little deeper into that. But this really depends on your setup on your machine and your cutter, how how aggressive you can be. That's really what that means. We can also leave some stock. So this is leaving a 0.5 millimeter of stock in here, and that will mean that we have to go in and clean this up. The last tab, so this tab here, the passage tab, is all with the cutter engaged in the material. The last tab is the cutter not engaged in the material. So when it's approaching the part, what we call lead in, lead out. Some of the things you can control in here is how it's going to wrap it around between the pockets. You can control how it's going to enter the materials. In this case, it's going to go in with what is called a heel leg. So you kind of like see it's going to do like a corkscrew into the material, which is it's a great way to enter material. So we're going to go in and we're not going to change anything in here. I just want to kind of like show you these different tabs here. So it will go in and it will calculate, and here you will see that we get the tool path in here that we just approached. So here you will see kind of like this corkscrew approach in here. Now, so let's go ahead and simulate this. So we can click up on the top setup. So we're selecting everything in the setup, going to the simulate. And I'm just going to leave the stock on so we can see our facing operation. We've already seen that one. We can actually see down here on the bar that we kind of like have some color down here at the bottom. So we can actually see when it's about done. Now we're going to switch to gray, which will give us the next cut. And now we can see that it's going to rough out these pockets in here. All right. So it's going to go ahead here and machine these different pockets. And again, I'm going to speed it up. You can speed it up down here on this little guy down here. We can get a clear view. And again, if this is all you needed to do, then you could go ahead and just go up here and now post out the code. Now, I want to show you another thing here, and that is, so we have left some stock in here. Many times the next toolpath you will use to clean this up would maybe be something like a contour toolpath. So what a contour toolpath is just going to follow the profile, where you saw the other toolpath here kind of like started in the center of the pocket and worked its way out, but it left that 0.5 millimeter of stock on the sides. Well, a contour toolpath will absolutely clean that up. So we can go in and we can apply that, and you will see that the menus again are pretty much the same. So again, I'm going to select the tool. Now this time I'm going to select a little bit smaller cutter. Many times you do that to get into the corners. So that is easy enough. And then we can go and we can select the geometry. And just like before, we can go ahead here now. We can select down here on the part to make sure that we get the right part here, just like that. I think that's it. And then we can go ahead here and machine that. So I'm just going to go into the height tab again. So the first one is the clearance height. That is when it's rapiding around up. The Z-axis is all the way up. It's not touching anything. The retract height is when it's done machining one pocket. How high is it going to lift up above the stock to go to the next one? Then you got the feed height. So that is when is the tool is going to start feeding from before it actually hits the material. We have a top height, what is the top of the part, and then we have the bottom height, how deep is the cutter's going to go. And in this case here, it's going to go to how deep, where I selected the contours, what was down in the bottom down here. So that will give us those here, and you will see that it's going to clean up. Okay, so I hope that that's helpful. Now another thing I just quickly want to show on this model is also if I machine around the part. So I'm going to use the same toolpath as before. I'm going to go into contours, and I'm just going to go ahead here and select the same end mill. So I'm not going to change the end mill. But when I go to the geometry, I'm going to select the bottom edge here on our outside, and now you will see that we get a toolpath that now is going to machine around the outside of the part down to that selected contour, right? So that's how that height tabs work when we do that. So I'm going to go and simulate that, just that toolpath, so you can see how it's now machining around the part, and you get that here. Now, the reason I want to show you this is that this looks pretty good right here, right? And you could be pretty tempted of doing it like this, but in the real world, we would have this part sitting in the vise like I had before. So this is one of the reasons it can be nice to have the vise in your model. So I'm going to go back to the Models tab here, and let me just turn all that stuff on isolated. And now we're back to here where you can see I have that part sitting in the vise. Because when I go back into the cam and I resimulate that toolpath that I just showed you, let's turn the stock off for a second. Can you see what happens here? That's not good, right? Because in this case here, it actually will machine right through our jaws. Now, hopefully, you know, if it's something simple, you don't have to have the vices and everything in here. You maybe just can figure that out and be like, oh my goodness, I can't machine all the way down to the bottom. I'm going to hit the solid jaw. But Fusion actually have a tool in here for you to be warned about this. That exists inside of the setup that we set up before. So let me show you that. So when you do the simulation up here, it's not just for you to see the toolpath. It can actually also be used for you to flag you that there is an issue. Now, this is set up in the original setup. Remember where we set where our work offset are going to be. And to edit anything, either the toolpath or that, just right-click on it and hit Edit. Okay, now you'll see that now it shows that triad again up here where we said we picked it up the part. And what we will see is I have down here what is called fixture. So if I check that, I can actually select what is fixturing. And I can now go over and select this jaw, and I can go over and select this jaw in here. So this is one of the advantages of having everything modeled up like this, because it gives you a good, not only a good overview of what's going to happen out of the machine, but it also gives you an option to use something like this fixture. And again, it exists right underneath your setup down at the bottom, and you just select the bodies that is kind of like touching your part. If I hit OK now, you will see that I get these red flags here, and that just says the software is right now is just saying, hey, something changed in the model, you need to regenerate me. And just like I hit right click to edit, I can also just go down here and say regenerate toolpath, and my toolpath will immediately update. Now when I now go in and hit simulate on that outside contour, you will actually see, and it may be hard to see on your screen, but there is actually a couple of red lines showing down on this green bar, and that is collision. But what is better is, look what happens when I hit the play button. When I hit the play button, my tool actually turns red on the path where it's going to hit that that jaw. Okay, so this is like right in your face. Hey, buddy, we have a problem here with this. So this is one of my reasons that I like to have things set up like this. And again, it really depends on what you're doing out there. You know, sometimes you are, you know, you're just gonna get something done quickly, and you really don't have, you know, time to set up all this, and that's fine too. I mean, I'm definitely guilty of doing that. But for other people, you know, if you have the time, this can be really nice to have this set up right here. And also if you're creating something like a setup sheet for an operator or something like that on the shop floor, they can get, you know, a view of what's going on. All right, so just quickly, I hope that this kind of like took you through the steps to do this. And also, just so you know, there's a bunch of YouTube videos on these steps already, and I would definitely be happy to lead you to those too if you send me an email too to all that content. Definitely make sure that we're here to help you to get going with your CAM for sure. All right, let's just jump over to another model here. So this is a little bit of a kind of like almost the same type of setup. At least we have a work table and we have a vise, but then we have a fixture right here. Now this fixture, let me just go in and turn some things off, right? So we can turn things off by go over to the tree here, and we can kind of like highlight them all, and then you can actually hit the V key on your keyboard and they will hide them. V for Victor or Vision. You can also hit these small light bulbs up here, but there was a little bit of a quick trick to do that, and I'm also going to get rid of these parallels. And let's just take a little bit closer look what we have. So we actually have a fixture for these two parts here. Now, if I go in and turn those two parts off, we get a little bit closer view of this fixture. So this fixture here could be made out of, for example, aluminum that you know, you could machine, you could put the aluminum block in the vise, machine the part, this part here, and then you could put the two parts in to actually do whatever machining you have. Maybe these parts were casted or something else, right? Sometimes you get parts that you don't have to start from scratch, but you actually just maybe here you have to face them off. Maybe you have to drill a couple of holes in these parts here. And by the way, this clamping here, the yellow thing, is called a Mighty Bite. They have a website. I used to use a lot of these clamps. What they do is they kind of like when you tighten down the nut in the center, they kind of like spread out and will clamp your part. Really, really nice, nice tooling. But what I want to just show you with this part is that there's actually also something else we can do in here when we got a machine apart, and that is we can also use sketches inside of Fusion as our geometry boundaries. So this is really just to make sure that you are aware of that you have this power, so you don't always have to have exactly modeled up what you need to machine. Let me show you. So I'm going to go in and start a setup on this part. So now we're going to go through the setup one more time. So this is where I'm telling the software how things are out of the machine. So I'm going to go up and hit setup, and this is, we're going to start from the top, work our way down. So this is still milling, and there's only one I use in here. That's the first one. Select the Z-axis and the X-axis, and again, for some funny reason, again, my gnomon is pointing the wrong way because that's how my luck is. So I'm going to go ahead here and change that. So again, it's setting on the Z-axis. So I'm just going to select the face that I want the Z-axis to point at. So I'm going to click on that, and just like that, then it's pointing the right direction. Next thing is to select where I want to pick up the part, the G54. And in this case here, I'm just going to select the corner over here on the raw stock for this example here. Now, when I hit OK, now I want to go ahead and I actually want to start machining the parts in these two pockets in here, but I kind of like want to make them connected. But as you can see, the geometry in here is not connected. It's two open pockets. So you can actually use some of the modeling things inside of Fusion to your advantage. So let me show you that. So I'm going to go back over to the modeling tab over here, and what I'm going to do is I am going to I like to make a plane that is a little bit above my part, just because it's kind of like splitting the two layers. So up here you have all the different planes you can do inside of Fusion, and if you have not gotten familiar with these, I would definitely recommend that you spend a few minutes on that. But I'm going to use this as called an offset plane, and I'm going to select the top face here, and I'm just going to move it up a little bit away from the part so I can sketch up on this plane. This just makes it easier when it's not right on the geometry. So I'm going to open up a sketch. Hopefully you're comfortable with that. I'm going to right click, create and sketch here. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to project these pockets up on that plane. So I'm going to go down here and hit project. You can also hit the P, okay? And I'm just going to go in here and see, I'm just going to select the faces here of these two pockets, just like that, okay? So now what I have done is I've kind of like projected those two pockets up here, and I can actually mess around with this. So I'm actually just going to go ahead and delete these two lines because I really don't want them to be enclosed, and then I'm just going to create my own line segment and kind of like close it off just like this here, right? So now what I have there is I kind of like just bonded them together, but it's definitely good enough for this fixture that I am creating right here. Now I'm going to hit stop sketch for this because that's what's really all I needed was a sketch that looked like that. And if you go over here in your tree, you now have that sketch sitting over here and it's already highlighted. And you could actually go in and rename this one for Cam if you wanted to. So now it's not just sketch one, now it's actually for Cam. And if I go back into our Cam toolpath where we have our setup, I'm going to go ahead and select a 2D adaptive again because that's what I want to use. Okay, I'm going to select the tool, and I'm just going to select, I don't know, this 10 millimeter here, for example. Select that cutter, and then under the geometry tab, what do you think I'm going to select? I'm going to select that sketch I have there, and I can actually turn it on and off depending on if it is in your way. You can just go over, of course, hit the little drop down. You could turn the sketches on and off if it's in your way. We'll leave it on for now. So now I've selected that this is what I want to machine. But to go back to the height tab, this is not the height, the depth I want the cutter to be in. So let's go over to the height tab. So like I said before, the first ones up here are kind of like coming from the down from down here. So the clearance height is going to wrap it around, and when it's done machining, how high it's going to go. The top height is the top of our cut. It's on the stock of the top. That's fine. But this one down here is not right because that actually has the contour that I selected, but it's that sketch that's flowing up. So I'm just going to hit the drop down and go down and hit selection. And now I can just select right down on my bottom of my pocket as the face that I want to machine down to. And if I hit OK now, you will now see that I have a connected tool path that will machine these two pockets out of here, right? So just be aware of that you can actually use sketches inside of Fusion to be able to use that as control. The last thing I want to show you here, and I had much more to show, but I'm running out of time. Maybe we just have to do another webinar. Email me if you want another webinar, and I'll make sure that we get something else set up, a part 2, or next level, or something like that. But what I wanted to show you in here was, let me just go back to, let me just delete this setup here, actually. Now we are all the way back to where we were before, and let me just turn everything back on. Go back to model. And turn everything on. Oops. Turn it all on. Right, so we can see things here again. All right. There we go. So that was how we kind of like had the part. Now, what I wanted to show you is another thing that can be extremely powerful with the job setup when you're setting up multiple parts like this. And that is, we can actually use another solid as stock. So what I have is right now these two throttle bodies, that's the parts we want to make, right? And they are like the finished parts going to look like. But what I actually also have is I have two other parts sitting down here called body, and you will see that they're missing all the holes inside of here. So this is how the stock will look like when I get it, because I only got to put the holes in it, and this is how it looks when I'm finished. This is what the customer as full. So you can actually use other bodies at stock when you're setting it up. Now I'm leaving everything on here as an assembly, so we have all the tables and the vices on and everything. Because what I want to show you is that when I go in right now to do CAM, and I go in and do a setup, you will see how I kind of like get a big yellow box that kind of covers everything in our window. And that's because the software right now is asking us, hey, what are you actually going to machine in here? That is the model tab on the setup. And right now it found 16 bodies, and we're definitely not going to be machining 16 bodies in here. So let me just hit the red X. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the two parts that we are going to machine. Just like that. That's the two bodies that we are going to machine in here. So whenever you have an assembly, when you have everything set up, then definitely that is no, I lost my train of thought. So definitely when you have when you have an assembly where you have the table and everything, you need to tell the software what you need to machine. So we pick those two bodies, that's what we need to machine. And then we can kind of like go back to where we were before. All right, so this is a model milling, and we got to select the orientation. Again, there's only one I use. So I select that one, and again, my Z-axis is pointing the wrong way. I hope you're getting this, not by now. So I'm just going to select as phase. It doesn't really matter what phase, as long as it's perpendicular to the direction I want. Now I want to show you here, though, because you can see on the screen that the gnomon is, or the triad is in the center of the block. And before I've been selecting up the upper edge of our part. But what if I wanted to select, since this is maybe casted part, how if I want to select by indicating one of the centers of these holes? So you don't have to use these stock points. You can also go in here and say, I'm going to select my own point. And if I just select the center circle like that, you will see that it's putting it to the center of that. So be aware of that you have options in here to select directly on the geometry. This could, if I was making this fixture, I might also put a hole in here that I would ream, so I had like a pickup hole right on the fixture. That might make it easier to select that. But what I got to show you too is when we do this now, by default, it kind of like have a box in here. So let me just go hit OK to this and show you. If I apply a drilling operation, so let's just select the tool, and I'm just going to select the center drill here, and let me just select a couple of holes here. That hole, and this is just a spot drill. So actually, I don't want it to drill to the bottom. So I'm just going to select the top, and then I'm just going to go down minus maybe 50 thousandths of an inch. Down like that. Okay, so I just selected these holes. Now notice what happens though when I go in to simulate this. You see how the stock is wrong? So I selected those two parts, and it kind of like just created a big block from those two. And I actually want to do a little bit better than that. I actually want to be able to see that raw casting stock I got. So that's why I have those two bodies in here I showed you before. So let me go in and turn off the two bodies that we just used, the finished ones, and select my stock instead. And if I go back into the job setup, so right click edit, and I go, so this is where we selected the two bodies we were going to machine. Let me go over to the stock and select from solid. Now I can actually select these two castings that is actually resembling my stock that I put in there. And if I hit OK, and I probably want to turn those, I don't need those anymore, but actually get the two parts that I am going to machine, the ones with the hole. I hope this is not too confusing. Now you will see when I go in and hit simulate that now the stock actually represent that. So hope that is helpful. So now when I go in and actually simulate this here, you will actually see that it drills right into the stock. So you just need to know that these options are available. All right. So with this here, of course, always running out of time. I hope that you got something out of this. It's really the steps I showed before is really what you need to know when you go in and do your setup. You always start with the setup. Just start from the top, work your way down. Only use the select Z-axis, X-axis until that doesn't work. And then you're more than welcome to email me. Select where you want to pick up the parts. So we do that down here with the triad. You can set up your stock either as relative size stock or as we just did from solid if you actually have a model you want to use. And then just remember, when you go in and apply your first tool path, that it's always the same order. It's the tool, then it's the geometry, what you want to machine, then it's the heights tab where you can control how deep the cut is going to go and how it's going to wrap it around, then where it's engaged inside of the material, and then the last one, how it's going to approach the part. This is really, you know, it's a little bit like bicycling, right? You start out and you fall over, and then suddenly you get it, and then you really don't have to worry about not getting it anymore after that. So let's get my PowerPoint back up here, maybe. All right, so that should show my email address. I hope some of you guys have been waiting for that. We got a couple of questions in here, and I just wanted to address those before I'm going to thank you all for taking the time. I really appreciate you guys taking the time. I know you all are busy. A couple of things is, how do we get devices and the table in Fusion? Like I said, you can many times go out to the manufacturer's website, and they actually would have models that you can bring in. I'll be happy to share with you what I got. You know, send me an email, say you would like to get the parts, and I'll send all that to you. I hope I cleared up the heights tab for you. Definitely something that, you know, if you have any questions, don't hesitate contacting. One, John asked if I could demonstrate cutting two-sided parts. You know what, John? That could be another webinar. I actually have a YouTube video that I think shows that fairly well. So send me an email, John, or I'll send, well, you know what? I got your email in here now, so I'll send you an email with those video links, and then definitely come back to me if that doesn't clear things up for you. Will there be another webinar for 3D CAM or 2.5? Yeah. So I actually was hoping to show some more. I actually had some 3Xs up there. So Jason, if you sent me an email, I will definitely make sure you get the parts. And one of the parts that I wanted to use today was a 3Xs part. And yes, we can definitely do email or definitely do another webinar on that. No problem with that. We can definitely get that scheduled. Joe, thank you. Thank you all for attending. Let me just, you know, we'll make sure there's nobody have any other questions. If you do, definitely send me an email. We are definitely here to make sure that you get up and running with our CAM. It doesn't make sense if we're not. So don't hesitate using us as a resource. And if you are on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, whatever, would love to connect with you. I share some tips and tricks once in a while, or just you know, a picture of me drinking a beer on my porch. So guys, thank you so much for taking the time, and until the next time, thank you so much. Have a great day.